The scent hit me first. My mother-in-law's jasmine perfume, sickeningly sweet, hanging in my foyer like a ghost. My keys clattered against the ceramic bowl on the entry table, except the bowl wasn't where I'd left it that morning. It sat 3 inches to the left, rotated 45 degrees, and the keys I'd dropped yesterday were gone. Before I start my story, I would love to know what city you are joining me from. Feel free to share it in the comments. Now, let me immerse you in this story. My pulse hammered against my throat as I stepped deeper into my own home, each footfall careful, measured. The coat rack had been moved flush against the wall instead of angled in the corner. My navy blazer hung on the 3rd hook instead of the 1st. Small changes. Deliberate changes. The kind that whispered, "We were here, and we can come back whenever we want." I pressed my palm against the wall to steady myself, feeling the cool paint beneath my fingertips. 63 years on this earth, and my hands were shaking like a teenager's. The living room sprawled before me, everything subtly wrong. The throw pillows on my leather couch had been rearranged. Burgundy on the left instead of right, the cream one with embroidered birds now centered instead of offset. My reading glasses, which I'd left on the coffee table beside my half-finished crossword puzzle, had vanished entirely. The hardwood floor creaked under my weight as I moved toward the mantel. My collection of African art pieces had been repositioned. The Yoruba mask now faced left instead of right. The small soapstone elephant from Ghana sat on the opposite end, miles away from where I'd placed it after dusting on Sunday. Someone had touched everything, handled my belongings with presumptuous hands. My jaw clenched so tight my molars ached. I forced myself to breathe through my nose, pulling air deep into my lungs. The jasmine perfume grew stronger near the kitchen doorway, mixing with another scent. Coffee. Fresh coffee. I hadn't made coffee this morning. I'd been running late for my shift at the hospital. Gulped down orange juice instead. Rinsed the glass, left it in the dish rack. The glass wasn't there. The kitchen stretched before me, sunlight streaming through the window over the sink, illuminating the truth of the invasion. Every cabinet door was closed. I always left the one with my coffee mugs slightly ajar, an old habit from years of early morning shifts. The fruit bowl on the counter had been moved 6 inches toward the refrigerator. My magnetic poetry words on the freezer door had been rearranged into a message I hadn't composed. Family knows best. Always listen. Trust us. My stomach dropped like an elevator cut from its cable. I gripped the counter edge, knuckles pressing white against my brown skin. They'd been in my home. Not just inside, they'd stayed long enough to brew coffee, to methodically go through each room, to leave their mark on everything I owned. The mail on my kitchen table had been sorted. Bills in one stack, advertisements in another, personal letters in a third pile. I'd left everything in the chaotic heap the mailman delivered. Now it sat in neat, judgmental rows. A yellow sticky note perched on top of the bills, handwriting I recognized immediately. My mother-in-law's elegant cursive. "We let ourselves in. You really should answer your phone. We need to discuss some important family matters. Margaret." The note trembled between my fingers. No apology, no explanation for the breaking and entering. Just that infuriating assumption of entitlement that had poisoned the air between us for 37 years of marriage and the 5 years since my husband passed. I yanked open the junk drawer where I kept my spare keys. Empty. The space where 3 spare keys had lived, front door, back door, deadbolt, gaped at me like a missing tooth. My breath came faster now, shorter. They'd taken my keys. They'd sorted through my private drawer of batteries and rubber bands and half-used birthday candles, found what they wanted, and stolen it. My cell phone buzzed in my purse. I didn't need to check to know who was calling. The buzzing continued, insistent, demanding, as I walked through the dining room. The chairs around my table had been pushed in at perfect intervals. The runner I kept slightly askew had been centered with military precision. Even the curtains had been adjusted, tied back with the cords I usually let hang loose. Upstairs. I had to check upstairs. My legs felt heavy as I climbed, one hand on the railing, the other clutched around my phone as it buzzed again. The family photos lining the stairwell wall had been releveled. I'd noticed weeks ago that the picture of my son's college graduation tilted slightly. Had meant to fix it, but never bothered. Someone else had bothered. Someone else had cared enough about the alignment of my memories to adjust them without permission. The bedroom door stood open. I always closed it before leaving. Always. My grandmother had taught me that. Never leave your sleeping space exposed to the rest of the house. The bedspread had been smoothed, hospital corners crisp and tight. I made my bed every morning, but not like this. Never like this. The decorative pillows I tossed on with casual placement now formed a symmetrical arrangement that belonged in a furniture showroom. My dresser drawers had all been closed completely. I habitually left my sock drawer cracked an inch. But someone had pushed each drawer flush, erasing my small acts of comfortable living. I yanked open the top drawer. My undergarments sat folded, in neat rows. My hands burrowed through the organized stacks, searching for the small lockbox where I kept my mother's pearl earrings and my grandmother's wedding ring. Gone. The lockbox was gone. My phone rang again. This time I answered, pressing the cold glass against my ear. "Felicia, finally!" Margaret's voice dripped with false relief. "We've been trying to reach you all day. You were in my house." "Well, yes, dear. We used the key from under the flower pot." "Really? That's not very secure." My fingers crushed the phone against my ear so hard, the plastic edge bit into my skin. Through the bedroom window, sunlight slanted across the neighbor's fence, illuminating dust particles I hadn't noticed before. Everything looked different now. Violated. "You had no right." The words came out flat, stripped of the rage boiling beneath. "We were just trying to help, sweetheart. The house was such a mess, and with you living alone now." I hung up. My thumb found the power button and held it until the screen went black. The silence that followed pressed against my eardrums like water pressure. The closet door stood partially open. I never left it that way. Couldn't stand the sight of my clothes hanging there like ghosts waiting to be worn. I crossed the room in 3 strides and yanked it wide. My shoes had been arranged by color and heel height. The boxes on the upper shelf now lined up with military precision, labels facing forward. Someone had handled every item I owned. Someone had touched the sweater my husband wore the last Christmas before the diagnosis. Someone had moved the shoebox containing 40 years of love letters. I dragged the desk chair across the carpet, positioned it beneath the shelf, and climbed up. My knees protested. 63 years of holding up a body that had grown heavier with grief and time. The shoebox sat exactly where it should be, but when I lifted it, the weight felt wrong. I pried off the lid. Empty. Not a single envelope remained. The box that had held every birthday card, every anniversary note, every scrap of paper with his handwriting, gone. My vision tunneled. The room tilted. I gripped the shelf edge to keep from falling, splinters digging into my palm. Downstairs, a key scraped metal against metal. The front door lock clicked. I froze on the chair, one hand still clutching the empty shoebox, the other white-knuckled on the shelf. Footsteps crossed the threshold. Multiple people, at least 3 distinct gates. One heavy and plodding, one quick and light, one with a slight drag on the left foot. "Felicia?" Margaret's voice carried up the stairs. "We know you're home. Your car's in the driveway." I stepped down from the chair, placed the shoebox on the bed, and moved to the bedroom doorway. My hand found the doorframe, steadying myself. Below, I could see the top of Margaret's perfectly styled silver hair. Behind her stood Dale, my late husband's brother, his bulk filling the entryway. A third figure lingered near the door, someone younger, with dark hair pulled into a tight bun. "Get out of my house." My voice carried down the stairwell without shouting. Years of teaching high school had given me that. Margaret looked up, her face arranging itself into an expression of wounded innocence. "Now, Felicia, there's no need to be hostile. We're family." I descended the stairs slowly, deliberately, maintaining eye contact with each step. Margaret backed toward the living room, her smile faltering. Dale held his ground, arms crossed over his chest. The younger woman, I recognized her now as their daughter Bethany, clutched a cardboard box against her stomach. "Where are my letters?" I reached the bottom step, one hand still gripping the banister. "We put them somewhere safe," Margaret said. "Some of those papers were crumbling. You can't just keep things in a shoebox forever, dear. We've organized everything properly in archival folders." "I didn't ask you to organize anything." I moved past Dale, close enough to smell the coffee on his breath. "I asked where they are." Bethany shifted the box to her hip. Through the cardboard flaps, I could see the edge of a manila folder, the corner of a leather-bound album I kept on the mantel. My wedding album. They'd taken my wedding album. I crossed the distance between us in 4 steps and grabbed the box. Bethany jerked backward, but I'd already gotten both hands on it. For 5 seconds we stood there, both gripping opposite sides of the cardboard, our faces inches apart. Her eyes widened. I yanked hard. The box came free. She stumbled backward into the doorframe. "You need to leave." I set the box on the floor behind me, positioning my body between it and them. Dale finally moved, his heavy footsteps making the floorboards creak. "Now hold on. We drove 2 hours to help you." "I didn't ask for help." "You don't know what you need anymore." Margaret's voice had shifted, losing its syrupy coating. "Living here alone, letting the place fall apart. We're trying to take care of you." My fingernails dug crescents into my palms. "By stealing from me?" "We didn't steal anything. We're preserving family memories. Those items belong to all of us. Dale has just as much right to his brother's things as you do." The air in the room felt thick, pressing against my chest. I walked past them into the kitchen, their eyes following. The junk drawer beside the sink had been reorganized, batteries lined up like soldiers, twist ties bundled with rubber bands. I opened the next drawer. My address book lay on top, the one with everyone's phone numbers written in my own hand. Beneath it sat the spare key to my house, the one that should have been hidden under the flower pot outside. I picked up the key and turned to face them. All 3 had followed me into the kitchen, crowding into my space like they belonged there. "This is the last time you use this." I dropped the key into the garbage disposal and flipped the switch. The metal grinding sound filled the kitchen for 10 seconds. When I turned it off, Margaret's face had gone white. The silence after the grinding stopped felt heavier than the machine's roar. Margaret's mouth opened and closed twice before any sound came out. Her perfectly manicured hand clutched the edge of my counter, knuckles whitening against the laminate. "You've lost your mind," she whispered. Dale moved forward, his bulk filling the narrow space between the refrigerator and the kitchen table. His face had turned a mottled red, starting at his collar and climbing up his neck like a rash. I could see a vein pulsing at his temple, the same one that used to throb when his brother and I would beat him at dominoes on Sunday afternoons. "That was our property," he said. "You had no right." My laugh came out sharp and bitter. I stepped backward until my hip pressed against the sink, creating distance but trapping myself in the corner. "Your property? The key to my house?" Vanessa had pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. The blue light reflected off her face, making her look younger and harder at the same time. She didn't look up when she spoke. "Mom, I'm calling the lawyer." "Put the phone down." My voice came out stronger than I felt. "All of you, get out of my house." Dale's hand shot out and grabbed the edge of the dish towel hanging from the oven door handle. He twisted it between his thick fingers, the red and white checks bunching up in his fist. "We're not leaving until we talk about this properly." "You're clearly not capable of making rational decisions." I watched the towel twist tighter. My grandmother had made that towel, her hands working the loom in the front room of her old house on Cypress Street. The edges had started to fray 2 years ago, but I'd kept using it anyway, kept washing it carefully and hanging it in the same spot. "Let go of that." My words came out quiet, but clear. He yanked it off the handle instead, the metal ring clattering against the oven door. The towel dangled from his grip like a flag of surrender, except nobody in this kitchen was surrendering anything. Margaret moved to the kitchen table and pulled out a chair. The legs scraped against the linoleum with a screech that set my teeth on edge. She sat down without asking, crossing her legs and folding her hands in her lap like she was settling in for a long stay. "We need to discuss your living situation," she said. "This house is too much for you." My heart hammered against my ribs so hard, I wondered if they could see it through my blouse. I looked at the three of them, Dale still clutching my grandmother's towel, Margaret perched at my table like a queen on a throne, Vanessa leaning against my refrigerator with her phone still glowing in her hand. The back door was 6 feet away, through the mudroom. The front door was blocked by their bodies. I calculated distances and angles, my mind running through options like shuffling cards. "The house is fine." "I'm fine." I pushed off from the sink and moved toward the table, forcing Margaret to tilt her head back to look at me. "And you're leaving now." Dale tossed the towel onto the counter. It landed in a heap, one corner dipping into the wet ring where I'd set my coffee mug that morning. "You're not hearing us. We found spoiled food in your refrigerator yesterday. 3 containers of leftovers growing mold." The blood rushed to my face. I'd been meaning to clean out the fridge, but had spent the week dealing with the broken fence in the backyard. The one they probably hadn't even noticed was fixed now. My hands curled into fists at my sides. "So you went through my refrigerator too?" "We were trying to help." Margaret's voice had taken on that patient, condescending tone people use with children and the elderly. "You're 63 years old, living alone in a 4-bedroom house that's falling apart around you. It's time to think about assisted living." The words hit like a physical blow. I grabbed the back of the chair across from Margaret, gripping it so hard my fingers ached. The wood felt solid under my hands, real and permanent, and mine. "Assisted living." I repeated the words slowly, tasting the bitterness in them. "You break into my house, go through my belongings, throw away my things, and now you want to put me in a home?" Vanessa finally looked up from her phone. "Nobody said anything about a home, Aunt Felicia. Just somewhere with support." "Where people can check on you." "I don't need checking on." Dale moved closer, and I could smell the coffee on his breath mixed with peppermint gum. Your bills were scattered all over the desk upstairs. Some of them looked overdue. My vision went red at the edges. They'd been in my bedroom. I thought of my personal papers spread across the desk, the medical bills from my last checkup, the insurance documents, the letter from the bank about refinancing. All of it private, all of it mine. I released the chair and walked toward Dale, watching his eyes widen slightly as I closed the distance between us. My pulse hammered in my ears, but I kept my movement slow and deliberate. When I reached him, I extended my hand palm up. "Give me your keys, right now." He shifted his weight backward, bumping against the kitchen counter. The sugar bowl rattled. "What keys?" "The ones you used to get into my house." I held his gaze without blinking. "Unless you kicked in the door, which I notice is still intact." Margaret stood up so quickly her chair scraped against the tile floor. "We're not giving you anything until we finish this conversation like adults." I turned on her, crossing the space between us in 3 strides. She flinched, pulling her handbag against her chest like a shield. The leather was new, expensive, probably cost more than my last month's utilities. I reached out and grabbed the bag's strap. "Let go!" Margaret pulled back, but I held firm, my other hand diving into the bag's open top. My fingers found her wallet, a package of tissues, loose coins, and then the familiar shape of keys on a ring. I yanked them out just as she wrenched the bag away from me. The keys jangled in my hand. I recognized the keychain immediately, a small brass elephant I'd given them 5 years ago as a Christmas gift. The irony twisted in my stomach. I held up the key ring, examining each key until I found the one that didn't match the others. Newer, shinier, with the distinct shape of my front door key. "Where did you get this made?" My voice came out quiet, barely above a whisper, which somehow made it more threatening. Vanessa had abandoned her phone entirely now, standing with her back pressed against the refrigerator. "Mom had it copied a few months ago, just in case there was an emergency." An emergency. I closed my fist around the keys, feeling the metal bite into my palm. And today's emergency was what exactly? My kitchen being too dirty for your standards? Dale moved toward the hallway, probably trying to position himself between me and the front door. I tracked his movement without turning my head, keeping my focus on Margaret. She'd regained some of her composure, smoothing down her blouse with shaking hands. "Your son asked us to check on you," she said. "He's worried about you living here alone after the stroke." The word hung in the air between us. Stroke. Such a small word for something that had turned my world sideways 6 months ago. A minor one, the doctors had said, barely noticeable except for some temporary weakness in my left hand. I'd recovered completely within weeks, but clearly, my son had been sharing medical information with his in-laws, painting me as some kind of invalid who needed monitoring. I walked to the kitchen drawer where I kept my tools. The junk drawer, really, full of screwdrivers, batteries, and random hardware. My hands worked quickly, pulling out a small hammer. The weight of it felt good in my grip. "What are you doing?" Vanessa's voice climbed higher. I didn't answer. Instead, I placed Margaret's keyring on the counter and positioned the new key so it jutted out over the edge. I raised the hammer. "Wait!" Margaret lunged forward, but I brought the hammer down hard. The key bent at an odd angle. I hit it again, then again, until the metal was twisted beyond recognition. The sound of metal on metal echoed through the kitchen, sharp and final. Dale had his phone out now, probably texting my son. "Good. Let him. Let them all see what happened when you pushed someone too far in their own home." I dropped the mangled key onto the counter where it clattered and spun before settling into stillness. "Get out of my house." I set the hammer down carefully, precisely, next to the ruined key. All of you? Now. Margaret's face had gone pale, except for 2 bright spots of color on her cheeks. You're being completely irrational. We were trying to help. By throwing away my food? By going through my personal papers? By deciding I'm too old and incompetent to live in my own home? I picked up the hammer again, not threatening, just holding it. You want to talk about rational? Let's talk about breaking and entering. Let's talk about theft, because I'm pretty sure some things are missing from upstairs. That hit a nerve. Vanessa's eyes darted to her mother's face, then quickly away. So I was right. They had taken something. What did you take? I stepped closer to Vanessa, who tried to make herself smaller against the refrigerator. Was it jewelry? Cash? What gave you the right? Your medication. The words burst out of Vanessa in a rush. The bottles from your bathroom. Some of them were expired, and you had duplicates of others. We were going to sort through them. Make sure you weren't taking the wrong things. My blood ran cold. I thought of my bathroom cabinet, organized exactly how I needed it. Blood pressure pills, vitamins, the low-dose aspirin my doctor recommended. All labeled, all current, all perfectly managed. And they'd taken them. Where are they? In the car, Dale said quickly. We can bring them back in. We can put everything back. Too late for that. I moved toward the back door, the one that led to my yard, and opened it wide. Cold November air rushed in, carrying the smell of dead leaves and damp earth. You can leave through here or through the front. Your choice, but you're leaving. I watched them exchange glances, a silent negotiation playing out in the tightening of Dale's jaw and the slight shake of Vanessa's head. Neither moved toward either door. Instead, Dale shifted his weight, planting his feet wider on my kitchen floor. His hand went to his phone in his pocket. We're not leaving until we've had a proper conversation about your living situation. His voice had changed, gone flat and formal. We've consulted with an attorney about options for elderly care. The hammer grew heavier in my hand. I set it down on the counter deliberately, my fingers aching from gripping it too long. The overhead light caught the scratches on the handle, decades of use worn into the wood. My late husband Bernard had used this hammer to build the deck out back, to hang every picture on these walls. An attorney. I repeated the words slowly, tasting the threat in them. You went to a lawyer about me? Vanessa pushed away from the refrigerator, her earlier fear transforming into something harder. She pulled a folded document from her purse, the paper making a crisp sound in the tense silence. We have documentation of concerning behaviors. The expired medications, the hoarding tendencies, the confusion about whether you'd been robbed when really you just forgot where you put things. My vision tunneled. I snatched the paper from her hand before she could unfold it, my arthritis screaming in protest. The header read, Petition for Guardianship Evaluation, with my name typed beneath it in cold black letters. They'd spelled out their case in clinical terms. Subject exhibits signs of diminished capacity. Unable to maintain safe living environment. Requires supervised care for her own protection. I crumpled the paper in my fist. The sound of it crushing filled the kitchen, louder than my hammering pulse. You documented me? Like I'm some kind of specimen? Mom, please. Vanessa reached for the paper, but I stepped back, my hip bumping the counter. How long? I threw the wadded document at her feet. How long have you been taking notes, building your little case? Was it before or after you made copies of my house key? Dale moved, trying to circle around to block the back door. I saw the strategy immediately. They thought they could trap me, contain me in my own kitchen like a confused animal. I grabbed my phone from the counter where I'd left it earlier, my thumb already swiping to the emergency call screen. One more step, and I'm calling the police. My voice didn't shake. Breaking and entering, theft of medication, attempted coercion. Let's see how that looks on your documentation. He froze. Vanessa bent to pick up the crumpled paper, smoothing it against her thigh with trembling fingers. You're proving our point. This paranoia, these accusations, get out of my house. I held up the phone so they could see the 9 already entered, my finger hovering over the 1. I won't ask again. The back door slammed open, the wind catching it. A figure stood silhouetted in the doorframe, broad-shouldered and tall. My neighbor Trevor stepped inside, snow-dusting his dark jacket. He lived 3 houses down, a veteran in his 40s who helped me with yard work sometimes. Everything all right, Miss Felicia? His deep voice carried easily over the wind. Saw unfamiliar cars in your drive and lights on late. Wanted to check. Dale's face flushed. This is a family matter. The family that broke into my home? I moved toward Trevor, gratitude flooding through me. The one stealing my medication and trying to have me declared incompetent? Trevor's expression hardened. He was a big man, and he knew how to use his size. He stepped fully inside, letting the door close behind him. That true? You folks break in here? Vanessa clutched her purse tighter. We have a key. We're her family. We were concerned about her welfare. Concerned enough to rifle through her things? Trevor crossed his arms. To throw out her property? Miss Felicia waters my plants when I travel. Brings in my mail. She's sharper than half the people I work with. He looked at me. You want them gone? Yes. He nodded once, then gestured toward the front of the house. You heard her? Time to leave. Dale's phone was in his hand now, but he wasn't calling anyone. He was calculating, weighing options. I could see him trying to figure out how this looked. A neighbor witnessing their forced entry, their refusal to leave when asked. His attorney would have a field day with that detail. This isn't over, Dale said, moving finally toward the living room. We're still pursuing guardianship. The judge will see reason, even if you can't. Vanessa followed him, but paused at the kitchen doorway. She turned back, her eyes red-rimmed. I really was trying to help. I love you, Mom. The words hit harder than any of the accusations. I wanted to believe them. Wanted to find the daughter I'd raised somewhere inside this stranger who'd violated my home. But love didn't break down doors. Love didn't steal and scheme and document. Then bring back my medication, I said quietly. And never use that key again. She flinched, but didn't argue. I heard their footsteps crossing my living room, the front door opening and closing. Through the window, I watched them get into Dale's silver sedan. Watched the headlights sweep across my lawn as they pulled away. Trevor stayed silent until the taillights disappeared. Then he moved to close and lock the back door, checking the deadbolt twice. You should change those locks tomorrow. I can help if you want. I'd appreciate that. My legs suddenly felt weak. I pulled out a kitchen chair and sat heavily, the adrenaline draining away and leaving exhaustion in its wake. Story continues. The kitchen chair creaked beneath me as I slumped forward, elbows on the table. My hands were trembling, not just shaking, but actually vibrating like I'd grabbed hold of something electric. I pressed my palms flat against the cool wood surface, trying to ground myself. trying to stop the tremors that radiated from my fingers up through my wrists. Trevor moved around my kitchen with careful deliberation, opening cabinets and closing them, checking the pantry. He was cataloging, I realized, creating his own mental inventory of what belonged and what might have been moved or taken. "Coffee?" he asked, already filling my kettle with water. I managed a nod. My throat felt raw, like I'd been screaming for hours instead of just a few terrible minutes. The kettle's familiar weight settled onto the burner with a soft metallic clink. Trevor turned the dial, and blue flame whooshed to life beneath it. My gaze drifted to the living room doorway. I could see the edge of my couch from this angle, the Afghan draped over the back, not where I'd left it. They'd been sitting there, probably for hours, rearranging my life like it was a dollhouse, making themselves comfortable in my space while I'd been out living what was left of my independence. The trembling in my hands spread to my arms. I pulled them off the table, tucked them against my ribs, but that just made my shoulders shake instead. My chest felt too tight, like someone had wrapped steel bands around my ribcage and was slowly turning a crank. "Breathe," Trevor said quietly. He'd moved to the table without me noticing, was crouching beside my chair so his eyes were level with mine. "Just breathe, Ms. Perry. In through your nose, out through your mouth." I tried to follow his instructions, but the air came in sharp gasps instead of steady breaths. My vision swam at the edges. The overhead light suddenly seemed too bright, casting harsh shadows that made my familiar kitchen look foreign and threatening. "You're having a panic attack," Trevor said, his voice calm and clinical. "It's going to pass. Focus on something in the room, something specific. Tell me what you see." The clock?" My voice came out strangled. "On the wall. The red one." "Good. What else?" "The magnets on the fridge. My granddaughter made them. Clay handprints." "Not Vanessa's daughter. My son's child. The one who still called me, who still wanted to know me." "What color are they?" "Purple. She painted them purple with gold glitter." The words came easier now. My lungs loosened fractionally, allowing deeper breaths. "She was 6, made them in art class." The kettle began to whistle, a low keen that built to a shriek. Trevor stood and moved to cut off the flame, the sudden silence almost jarring. He poured water over coffee grounds in my French press, the rich smell filling the kitchen and driving out some of the lingering antiseptic scent Vanessa must have brought with her. My breathing steadied. The trembling receded to just my hands again, manageable. I straightened in the chair, feeling my spine pop and crack. Every joint ached like I'd aged a decade in the last hour. Trevor set a mug in front of me, the steam rising in lazy spirals. I wrapped both hands around the ceramic, letting the heat seep into my cold fingers. He'd added cream without asking, had probably noticed the bottle in my fridge when he was checking the cabinets. "Thank you," I said. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat, his own mug held loosely in one hand. "You need to call someone. A lawyer, probably. Maybe your son?" "Marcus lives in Portland. He's got his own family, his own life." I sipped the coffee, felt it burn down my throat in a way that was almost pleasant. I can't drag him into this mess. This mess is already going to drag him in. Better he hears it from you than gets served with guardianship papers. The truth of that settled heavily in my gut. I set down the mug and pushed back from the table, my chair legs scraping against the linoleum. Standing felt like an act of defiance against the exhaustion trying to pull me under. I walked into the living room, Trevor following at a respectful distance. The space looked wrong in ways that went beyond simple rearrangement. My books on the shelf were organized by size now instead of subject. The throw pillows on the couch were arranged symmetrically, corners aligned. The TV remote sat exactly centered on the coffee table next to a stack of medical journals I'd never purchased. I picked up the top journal, flipped it open. Inside the front cover, someone had written in neat blue ink, "Visual Memory Assessment Tool, Baseline." My stomach turned over. "They were testing you," Trevor said from behind me. "Setting up scenarios to see if you'd notice the changes." I dropped the journal like it had caught fire. It hit the coffee table with a sharp crack, pages splaying open. My vision blurred again, but this time from tears rather than panic. Hot anger surged up through my chest, burning away the last of the fear. They'd turned my home into a laboratory. Every moved picture frame, every reorganized drawer, it was all evidence for their case. Documentation of my supposed decline. I moved to the bookshelf, running my fingers along the spines. Medical textbooks mixed with mysteries, self-help books next to cookbooks. Nothing was where it should be. Nothing made sense anymore. My hand closed around a framed photo. Me and Vanessa at her college graduation, both of us laughing at something long forgotten. I stared at our faces, trying to reconcile that joyful woman with the one who'd just violated my home. The frame slipped from my fingers. I tried to catch it, but my reflexes were too slow, still compromised by the adrenaline crash. It hit the hardwood floor, and the glass shattered, a spiderweb of cracks radiating out from the impact point. I stared at the broken pieces, at our fractured faces visible through the damaged glass. My knees started to buckle. Trevor's hand caught my elbow, steadying me before I could fall. I pulled away from Trevor's grip, my arm sliding free as I stumbled toward the kitchen. The floor felt unstable beneath my feet, like walking on the deck of a ship in rough waters. My hip collided with the doorframe, and pain shot through my pelvis, sharp and immediate. I gasped, but kept moving. The kitchen was worse than I'd remembered. Every drawer hung open at different angles, creating a jagged mouth of chaos. I yanked the silverware drawer completely out, sending forks and spoons cascading across the linoleum. The metallic clatter echoed off the walls as I threw the drawer aside and grabbed the next one. Takeout menus, batteries, rubber bands bundled with twist ties. All the junk drawer contents scattered across the counter as I searched for something, anything, that would tell me how long this had been happening. My fingers found a receipt wedged in the back corner. I pulled it into the light. A hardware store bill. Key duplication. Dated 3 months ago. The paper crumpled in my fist. 3 months. They'd been planning this for 3 months, coming and going as they pleased while I slept, or ran errands, or visited friends. How many times had I blamed myself for misplacing things? How many nights had I lain awake, wondering if something really was wrong with my mind? I dropped the receipt and moved to the refrigerator. The magnets were all clustered on the left side now, pinning nothing. My shopping lists and appointment cards were gone. I ripped open the fridge door so hard it bounced back, nearly catching my shoulder. Everything inside had been reorganized by color instead of type. Red items together, green items together, yellow and orange in their own rows. My meal prep containers sat in the back, contents congealed and growing mold. I'd been so disoriented, so convinced I was losing my grip, that I'd stopped eating my own cooking. My stomach heaved. I slammed the door shut and gripped the counter, knuckles white against the granite. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the house's chill. "There's more." Trevor stood in the doorway, holding his phone. I found a camera. The words didn't process at first. I stared at him, watching his mouth move, trying to connect sound to meaning. Behind the clock in the hallway, small lens, wireless connection. He held up the phone, showing me a tiny device no bigger than a shirt button. Recording everything? My legs gave out completely this time. I slid down the cabinet, my back scraping against the handles as I crumpled to the floor. The cold linoleum pressed against my thighs through my pants. I couldn't catch my breath. Each inhale felt like sucking air through a straw. They'd been watching me, documenting my confusion, my distress, my desperate attempts to make sense of the chaos they'd created. Every private moment captured and saved as evidence. I pressed my palms against my eyes until colors exploded behind the lids. The pressure helped anchor me, gave me something physical to focus on besides the violation crawling across my skin. Trevor's shoes appeared in my field of vision, worn work boots with mud caked in the treads. He crouched down, his knees popping audibly. "We need to call the police now. This is criminal." I lowered my hands and looked at him. His face was blurred, either from my tears or the fluorescent kitchen light creating halos around everything. My mouth tasted like copper and bile. "She's my daughter-in-law." The words scraped out of my throat. "Marcus's wife." "I don't care if she's the Pope. This is breaking and entering, harassment, maybe elder abuse." He pulled out his phone again. "I'm calling Detective Hodges. He handled that break-in on Maple Street last year." I grabbed his wrist before he could dial. My fingers wrapped around the bone and tendon, feeling his pulse hammer against my thumb. The contact jolted something awake in me. Not hope, but something harder, angrier. "Wait!" I released him and used the cabinet to haul myself upright. My muscles screamed in protest. Every joint felt inflamed, swollen with the adrenaline that had been flooding my system for hours. "I need to see what else they've done." I walked past him, through the dining room where the chairs were pushed in at precise angles, into the home office I rarely used anymore. The door stuck when I tried to open it. I threw my shoulder against the wood, and it gave way with a crack that I felt more than heard. The room had been completely rearranged. My desk faced the wrong wall. Filing cabinets were lined up soldier-straight beneath the window, but it was the bulletin board that stopped me cold. Someone had pinned up photographs. Dozens of them. All of me. Blurry shots taken through windows. Clear images of me in my garden, at the grocery store, getting my mail. Timestamps in the corners showed dates spanning months. My vision tunneled. The edges of the room went dark and fuzzy. I gripped the doorframe, feeling the wood grain bite into my palm. My heart hammered so violently I could see my shirt moving with each beat. One photo showed me standing in this exact spot, staring at an empty bulletin board with confusion written across my face. They'd captured the moment I'd discovered their handiwork, then put it back up for me to find again. Was. Write unique plot with 80% action-description, 20% dialogue. I tore the photos down with both hands, ripping through the pins that held them. The bulletin board shook on its mounting, threatening to pull free from the wall. Paper scattered across the floor in a confetti of surveillance. My life reduced to stolen moments and violated privacy. My fingernails bent backward as I clawed at the last few images pinned near the top corner. Behind me, footsteps retreated down the hallway. The front door opened and closed with a soft click that barely registered through the roaring in my ears. I kicked through the pile of photographs, sending them sliding across the hardwood. My foot connected with the desk leg, and pain shot up through my shin, sharp, and clarifying. The filing cabinets gleamed in the afternoon light streaming through the window. I grabbed the top drawer of the nearest one and yanked it open. More photos, stacks of them, organized by date in hanging folders with color-coded tabs, green for spring months, yellow for summer, orange for fall. They'd been watching me for over a year. My hands moved without conscious thought, pulling out handfuls of folders and dumping them on the floor. Paper spilled everywhere. Receipts, copies of my medical records, printouts of my bank statements. A manila envelope marked with my maiden name contained my marriage license, divorce papers, the deed to this house, documents I kept in a safety deposit box at the bank. I dropped to my knees and spread the papers across the floor in overlapping layers. My breath came in short, sharp bursts that made my ribs ache. The carpet beneath me felt wrong, too plush, too new. I pulled up the corner and found fresh padding underneath. They'd replaced the flooring. The sound of a car engine starting outside broke through my focus. I lurched to my feet and ran to the window. A silver sedan pulled away from the curb 2 houses down, its windows tinted dark enough to hide the occupants. The license plate was covered with mud, deliberately obscured. I pressed my forehead against the glass and watched until the car disappeared around the corner. My breath fogged the window, creating a small circle of condensation that expanded and contracted with each exhale. When I pulled back, I left a greasy mark from my skin. The house settled around me with a series of small creaks and groans. Sounds I'd known for 30 years that now felt foreign and threatening. I walked back to the scattered documents and began gathering them into piles based on category. My movements were mechanical, methodical. The physical task kept my hands busy, while my mind raced through possibilities and plans. A key scraped in the front door lock. I froze with a handful of bank statements clutched against my chest. The lock turned once, twice. The deadbolt I'd installed last month clicked open smoothly, as if it had never been engaged. Footsteps entered the foyer, 2 sets moving in tandem. The floorboards announced their progress through my home with each weighted step. They weren't trying to be quiet. I stood and moved to the office doorway, positioning myself where I could see down the hallway. My body tensed, every muscle coiling tight. The adrenaline that had been ebbing now flooded back with renewed force, making my hands shake and my vision sharpen to crystal clarity. A woman appeared first, mid-50s with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore pressed slacks and a cardigan despite the heat. Her shoes were sensible flats that made soft shuffling sounds on my floors. Behind her came a man of similar age, barrel-chested and balding, carrying a cardboard box against his hip. They stopped when they saw me. The woman's mouth formed a small O of surprise. The man shifted the box to his other arm. "Felicia," the woman said. "We didn't expect you home so early." I didn't recognize her voice. Didn't recognize either of them. My jaw clenched so tight I felt my teeth grinding together. "You need to leave." The words came out low and controlled, each syllable carved from ice. The woman took a step forward, one hand extended in a placating gesture. "We're just finishing up. We wanted to—" I moved before she could complete the sentence. 3 strides closed the distance between us. I grabbed her outstretched wrist and twisted, applying pressure to the joint with practiced precision. She gasped and went up on her toes, her body automatically following the direction of the pain to avoid injury. The man dropped his box. Contents spilled across the floor. More framed photos, decorative items I didn't recognize. A small clock shaped like a rooster. He reached for me, but I shifted my weight, pulling the woman between us as a barrier. I said, "Leave." Story block 9:10. I released the woman's wrist with a sharp push that sent her stumbling backward into the man's arms. They clutched each other for balance, their faces pale and shocked. My hands remained raised, fingers flexed and ready, as I watched them process what had just happened. The man's jaw worked soundlessly for a moment before he found his voice. "Your son asked us to help. We're trying to make things better for you." The words hit like a physical blow, but I didn't let my body show it. My feet stayed planted, shoulders square, breathing controlled. Son. The word explained everything and nothing. I'd been estranged from Marcus for 3 years. No, I caught myself. Different situation. My boy had moved to Portland. We spoke monthly, stilted conversations about weather and work. I lowered my hands slowly, deliberately. Let them see the choice I was making to step back rather than advance. The woman rubbed her wrist, red marks already forming where my fingers had gripped. Part of me felt a flicker of regret. The larger part felt nothing but the cold weight of boundaries violated. "Get out of my house!" I pointed toward the door, arm extended like a blade. "Take nothing with you." They moved toward the entrance, shuffling sideways to keep me in sight. The man bent to retrieve something from the floor, a framed photograph, and I took a half step forward. He dropped it instantly, the glass cracking against the hardwood. They scrambled through the doorway and down the porch steps. Their car doors slammed in quick succession. The engine roared to life, and tires squealed against asphalt as they fled. I stood in the doorway and watched until the sedan disappeared around the corner. My hands had finally started to shake. I gripped the doorframe until splinters bit into my palm, using the small pain to anchor myself in the present moment. The house felt different now. Violated. I moved through each room with careful steps, cataloging the changes. In the kitchen, my cast-iron skillets had been moved from their hooks to a lower cabinet. The spice rack sat on the counter instead of mounted to the wall. Someone had rearranged my refrigerator magnets into a neat grid pattern when I'd always kept them scattered. The bathroom showed more intrusions. A bath mat in pastel blue replaced my burgundy one. Grab bars had been installed beside the toilet and in the shower, bolted directly into my tile without permission. I ran my fingers over the cold metal, feeling the anger shift into something more complex. These weren't random changes. They were adaptations for aging. For weakness. In my bedroom, I found the most disturbing alteration. My bed had been moved away from the wall, creating clearance on both sides. The nightstand held a new lamp with a sensor button instead of my old twist knob model. A medical alert pendant lay coiled beside it, the red button gleaming like an accusation. I sat on the edge of my mattress and stared at that pendant for a long time. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw my son's name on the screen. 5 missed calls, 3 text messages. I opened the most recent one. "Mom, please don't be angry. They were trying to help. I was worried after you fell last month." My thumb hovered over the keyboard. The fall had been minor, caught my toe on a rug corner, went down hard on one knee. I'd called him that evening because I'd been shaken, needed to hear a familiar voice. He'd asked questions. I'd answered honestly. Too honestly, apparently. I typed slowly, deleting and rewriting several times before settling on words that felt true. "They broke into my home, rearranged my life without asking. This isn't help. This is control." The response came quickly. "I gave them the spare key. I thought you'd be at your book club." My molars ground together again. That spare key lived in a magnetic box under my porch eave, meant for emergencies only. I'd shown him where it was years ago when he'd still visited regularly. The betrayal expanded in my chest like a balloon inflating, pressing against my ribs. I stood and walked back to the living room. The scattered contents from the dropped box lay across my floor like archaeological evidence. I knelt and began gathering items, examining each one. A digital picture frame, already loaded with photos I didn't want displayed. A large button telephone, a weekly pill organizer. A book titled Aging in Place, A Complete Guide. The rage returned, but it came with clarity this time. I carried everything to the porch and set it in a neat pile beside my rocking chair. Went back inside for the bath mat, the pendant, the sensor lamp. Trip after trip until the pile grew substantial. Then I locked my door and sat down to wait. 2 hours passed before a different car pulled up. A silver sedan, newer model, rental plates. My son emerged from the driver's side, taller than I remembered, with more gray at his temples. He climbed the porch steps slowly, eyes fixed on the pile of rejected items. "Mom." He stopped 3 feet away, maintaining careful distance. "Can we talk?" I stood but didn't move closer. Let him see my posture, the set of my shoulders, the way my hands hung loose and ready at my sides. "You gave strangers access to my home." "They're not strangers. They're professional home safety consultants. I hired them after you told me about the fall. You sent people to modify my house without my consent." Each word came out measured and hard. "You treated me like I couldn't make my own decisions." His face flushed. He gestured at the pile. "These could save your life. The grab bars, the medical alert system. Maybe." I cut him off. "But that was my choice to make, not yours." The silence stretched between us. A car passed on the street. Wind chimes rang from a neighbor's porch. He rubbed his face with both hands, and I saw how tired he looked. How worried. "I'm scared, Mom. You're alone in this house. What if something happens and no one's there to help?" The honesty in his voice cracked something in my chest, but I didn't soften my stance. "Then that's my risk to take. I'm 63, not 93. My mind is sharp. My body works. I get to decide when and if I need help." He nodded slowly, understanding beginning to dawn in his expression. I overstepped. "You did." "I'm sorry." I let the apology sit there between us for a moment before responding. "Your in-laws, those consultants, they won't be coming back. Ever." "Understood." He shifted his weight, looking at the pile again. "The grab bars are already installed. They'd leave holes if we remove them." I considered this. The bars were useful, even if I resented how they'd arrived. "Those can stay. Everything else goes." He gathered items from the pile, loading his arms with picture frames and safety equipment. Made multiple trips to his car while I watched from my chair. When the pile was gone, he returned to the porch steps and sat down heavily. "I should have asked first." His voice was quiet. "Should have trusted you to know what you need." I sat back down in my rocking chair, setting it in motion with one foot. The familiar creak of wood against wood was soothing. "Yes, you should have." We sat in silence as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. 79815. 6 months later, I stood in my kitchen on a Tuesday morning, sunlight streaming through windows I'd chosen to leave curtain-free. The coffee maker gurgled its familiar song while I arranged fresh flowers in a vase, bright yellow daisies from my own garden. My hands moved with practiced ease, trimming stems at an angle the way my mother had taught me decades ago. The house felt different now, lighter. Every object in it existed because I'd decided it should, not because someone else had determined my needs. I'd rearranged the living room furniture 3 times before finding the perfect configuration, shoving the heavy couch across hardwood floors by myself, pausing only to catch my breath and admire my handiwork. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from my son. "Dinner this Sunday? Your place or ours?" I typed back quickly. "Mine. I'm making pot roast." The grab bars in the bathroom remained. A compromise I'd made peace with. Some mornings I used them, other mornings I didn't. The choice was mine, and that made all the difference. I'd even added a few touches of my own. A new shower curtain with tropical birds, plush towels in deep purple, and a small wooden stool I'd painted turquoise for washing my feet. The doorbell rang at 9:30. I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel and walked to the front door, peering through the peephole. Agnes, from 3 houses down, stood on my porch, holding a covered dish. "Brought you some of that cornbread you liked," she said when I opened the door, her weathered face creasing into a smile. "You didn't have to do that." I accepted the warm dish, the ceramic hot against my palms. She waved a dismissive hand. "Book club tonight at 7. Don't forget." I'd joined the neighborhood book club in March, something I'd been too isolated to consider before. Now my calendar had regular marks. Book club on Tuesday evenings, volunteer shift at the library on Thursdays, lunch with my college roommate every other Friday. I'd even signed up for a pottery class that started next month. After Agnes left, I carried the cornbread to the kitchen and uncovered it, breathing in the sweet, buttery aroma. The house smelled like coffee and fresh flowers and warm bread. Smells I'd chosen, in combinations I preferred. I'd thrown out the automatic air fresheners that had appeared during the invasion, replacing them with nothing but open windows and whatever scents occurred naturally. My garden had become a project of passion, Jacked. Every morning before the heat set in, I spent an hour tending vegetables and flowers, my knees protected by foam pads I'd purchased myself. Tomato plants climbed their stakes in neat rows. Zucchini sprawled across black soil. Marigolds bordered everything, their orange and yellow blooms keeping pests away naturally. My hands bore dirt under the fingernails and small scratches from rose thorns. Badges of honest work I wore with pride. The meditation corner in my bedroom had disappeared within days of the confrontation. In its place, I'd created a reading nook with a comfortable armchair positioned near the window, a small table for my tea, and a lamp with a shade that cast warm, golden light. Books stacked on the floor beside it, waiting to be read. No curated wellness space, just genuine comfort designed for actual use. I'd started walking every evening after dinner, circling the neighborhood at my own pace, stopping when I wanted to admire someone's garden or chat with neighbors sitting on their porches. No fitness tracker monitoring my steps, no app reminding me to move. Just my body, my decision, my rhythm. The living room photo wall had been reconstructed entirely. I'd taken down every single frame and started fresh, choosing which memories deserved prominence. Pictures of my parents on their wedding day, my son as a gap-toothed 7-year-old holding a science fair trophy. My late husband and me dancing at our 20th anniversary party, his arms around my waist, both of us laughing. But I'd also added new photos, recent ones, me and Agnes at a museum, my book club friends gathered around someone's dining table, a selfie from the morning I'd successfully assembled a complicated bookshelf without help, my face sweaty and triumphant. The emergency call button system had been donated to a senior center. The pill organizer went in the trash. I'd been managing my own medications for decades without mishap. The non-slip rug pads got relegated to the garage. Slowly, methodically, I'd reclaimed every inch of my space. My relationship with my son had shifted into something more honest. He called twice a week now, asking about my life rather than checking on my safety. We talked about books we'd read, shows we'd watched, neighborhood gossip. When he visited, he sat in my living room as a guest, not an inspector. His wife had apologized in a stiff, formal way that suggested genuine discomfort with her previous actions. I'd accepted the apology without warmth, but without hostility. a neutral acknowledgement that we could coexist politely in the same family. I poured my coffee into a mug I'd bought specifically because it made me smile. Bright red ceramic with, "Nevertheless, she persisted," printed in bold white letters. Carried it to the front porch where my rocking chair waited. The morning air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of cut grass and blooming jasmine from somewhere down the street. A young couple jogged past, and the woman waved. I waved back, recognizing them from the neighborhood association meeting last month. Connection, but on my terms. Community, but with boundaries intact. The rocker creaked beneath me as I set it in motion, the same sound it had made for 15 years. Familiar, reliable, mine. The coffee was hot and strong, exactly as I preferred it. My garden stretched before me, thriving under my care. Inside the house, everything existed in its proper place. Proper, according to me, the only person whose opinion mattered within these walls. I was 63 years old, and I was exactly where I needed to be. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.